Welcome to part 4 of Bob Lazar's story on UFOs, UAPs, and aliens. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, the link to those videos are in the description below. Check those out and then come back over and join us here for the final installment, part 4 of his story. Without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
Or water, why doesn't it matter? I love when he talks about this shit.
Well, first of all, Commander Fravor was the F-18 pilot off the Nimitz that was sent out to find out what this stuff is. But and it wasn't just, I got a chance to talk to him recently, and it wasn't just a radar image. I mean, Commander Fravor had eyes on it for over 5 minutes watching this thing, as 4 other pilots did. So this wasn't a radar blip or anything. I mean, these guys were watching this thing. But, you know, one of the things I think in the gimbal video, the way the craft that we worked on flies is it doesn't fly like a conventional aircraft does, and it doesn't fly like a flying saucer would in a 1950s movie. It flies belly first. I mean, it may set down conventionally, but it always rotates. It does a roll maneuver, puts its belly towards the target, and then moves away at high speed.
So it'd be like a car flying with the wheels forward.
Right, right. I mean, it may land on the wheels, but at some point when it wants to leave, flips up, points the wheels where it wants to go, and takes off. And the gimbal video, you can see the craft do the roll maneuver. And it's really interesting. It behaves exactly like the craft that I worked on.
So
I'm curious if that gives credence to Dr. Greer's idea that a lot of these UAPs or UFOs that we're seeing is actually basically our craft that was man-made. Dr. Greer talks a lot about, yes, there are real, extraterrestrial ships that are flying around, but there's also man-made ships. And so I'm curious if, hey, this is one of those things that Bob Lazar might have worked on or seen before, because not every UFO or UAP video that we've seen, they're flying, flipping the belly up and then taking off. Some of them are just flying around, zipping around as spheres or cubes or orbs. So I'm curious to see the evidence that Dr. Greer comes about in the coming years in terms of what the gimbal video is, in terms of what Bob Lazar is talking about, because Dr. Greer tends to think it's just our craft that we've re-engineered based on the stuff that we've collected, which Bob Lazar has been talking about.
much like we have different shaped aircrafts and fighter jets and cars, they probably have different shapes of these objects that operate under similar principles.
Right,
perhaps.
but they all have the same power source.
They all have the same power source. And we're also dealing with, if you think about the laws of technological progression, you think of Moore's law and you think of how things accelerate, you've got to think that if this civilization is who knows how many years more advanced than we are, if not even years. I mean, we're thinking about it in terms of conventional terms, right? The way we look at the world. I mean, they might be just superior in terms of their intellect. They've got to be. Maybe. We don't know, right?
Well, the only reason I say that is because, look, everyone doesn't necessarily start at a steam engine and go to an internal combustion engine and then, electric power, nuclear power, and go up the ladder that we come on. The binary, if the stuff is true about the origin and the binary star system, and they have heavier elements that we don't have, and this stable element 115 is a naturally occurring material, maybe that's the first thing they started experimenting with. And the version of
That's actually really fascinating. Something I've never I've thought about before in terms of the progression of evolution, the progression of their technology, is that they theoretically wouldn't necessarily even start where we started, going through industrial ages, right? The Bronze Age, dealing with copper, iron, even crafting their tools. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is that's a really fascinating point, is that their progression could have been exponentially faster than ours, depending on what elements they have available to them on their own planet, I suppose. Interesting, fascinating.
Their steam engine, their first product was something that operated like this. And actually, when they came to Earth to look around, or, whatever, they were amazed at the stuff we were doing. These guys burned stuff and squirted out the back to go forward. So,
Right.
Who says they follow any kind of normal progression like that?
My thought was, if you went back to the 1400s and then you went from 1400 to 1500, you're not going to see that much of a difference technologically.
Right.
If you go from 2000 to 3000, I assume there's going to be a radical change.
Right. Well, the delta, the rate of change
Yeah.
is magnificently higher than it used to be.
Right. So if you think about what they had in 1988 and you think about what they probably have in 2019, just logically, it seems like they would advance.
I would think so.
The only question is, like, are they living? Is that a living thing in terms of like a biological thing, or are they some sort of an artificially created creation like we are working on right now? I mean, we're in the middle of working on artificial reality, artificial beings, sentient beings, artificial intelligence. There's silicon-based life forms that they're essentially trying to create. Boston Dynamics, or was it?
He brings up a very interesting point, because if you read, I think it's called Future of Humanity by Michio Kaku. Don't quote me on the actual title of the book, but I believe that is it. And the author is Michio Kaku. He talks about different progressions of civilization and where we could be at some point. And in terms of terraforming planets, visiting other planets, our best bet for kind of future expansion is not necessarily sending human beings to other planets, but actually sending artificial intelligence in combination with robotics. And we're kind of seeing that development right now with ChatGPT-4 already being installed and inputted into robots that are able to cook actual meals, work ovens, flip a pancake, mix, like take out the ingredients out of the fridge. So we're kind of seeing this progression of a possibility of this could be a thing. And it's not necessarily maybe extraterrestrials in the sense of what we believe of being biological, more so in terms of a robot or some sort of artificial intelligence being sent here and visiting us and gathering information.
Is it Boston Dynamics at the company
You
that's
can
making
make
those
robots,
crazy
yeah.
robots? Yeah.
You can make machines out of flesh,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
a cyborg or a cybernetic organism is just that, that's what a lot of people think those like gray things are, that people call the grays.
Yeah.
Is like they're machines
Right.
printed from flesh. So what you're saying is like not
Well, they
so
could just
far
be
off
No.
synthetic life.
Synthetic
they don't
life,
even need
yeah.
to be,
Right.
machines.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
they seem to have no sex organs. The way they're described by people that have had interactions with them, assuming these people aren't liars
Right.
or crazy or whatever.
Right.
That they have no sex organs and that they don't seem to have any muscle. They're just almost like a frame.
Right.
And they have enormous heads. I mean, if you look at Australopithecus or depictions of ancient hominids, and then you go to human beings, one of the things you see is bigger heads and weaker bodies.
well, you see
It's
a
almost
clear
like
progression
yeah.
of evolution,
Yes.
too, where for something like that, I would lean towards a synthetic organism because it
Yes.
looks like it was made for a specific task. There's
Right.
no reproductive organs, so, I mean, that almost kind of leaves out any kind of, physical evolution.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's also our bottleneck, right? Our bottleneck is our biological imperative. The need to breed, emotions, fear, anxiety, all these different things that exist in order to force us into making sure we reproduce. I mean, that's essentially what it is. There are human reward systems that aren't necessary once they can figure out a way to make some sort of sentient artificial life. Some sort of thing that doesn't have these biological limitations that we have.
By the way, these craft, all these different kinds have been reported because it was confusing. I always thought of flying saucers what I heard Bob Lazar talk about, flying saucer, right? But if you look back in history, people have always reported the weirdest shapes. Like none of them are alike. There are the saucers, but you got cigar shaped, you got the top hat shaped, you have orbs. Why? Maybe they're serving different purposes. They're doing different things like we'd use different tools. And I want to be clear, the reason I know that memo is real is because I spent a lot of time with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon. Last guy to film him before he died, right? That's how I know. I don't want any journalists thinking I got it from anywhere else. I know because of Dr. Mitchell. And he said the same thing. Maybe these things are performing different tasks, And that's
well,
why
they seem, if you think about what an alien is in terms of our the sort of iconic image of an alien, like the Steven Spielberg Close Encounters of the Third Kind alien, they seem like what we'd assume a human being would eventually become.
Right.
And if these things are tiny, human beings are smaller than they've ever been before. They're weaker than they've ever been before. And there seems to be a trend in that direction. And this trend seems to be amplified by our technological progression. There are a lack of need for muscle strength and our lack of need for violence. And we're moving in a society to try to get away from all the things that we think are abhorrent about.
There actually is some truth to what Joe Rogan is talking about in terms of our evolution and progression. Is a lot of the depictions too of extraterrestrials, ET, whatever you want to call them, little green men, is they have really small mouths. And if you look at even, heck, going back a few hundred years ago, if you look at kind of the, I shouldn't say a few hundred, but if you look at Native American bone structure, they have really wide jaws, and their teeth are able to form the way that they're supposed to form. But for us, if you look at your wisdom teeth or kind of even your molars in the back, our jaws have gotten really skinny. Our mouths have gotten smaller just based on the type of food that we eat, the communication that we utilize, the way that we use our mouths. So the evolution has changed in terms of we could see maybe at some point getting to a mouth that is the size of a UFO or an ET. And it's similar to the eyes, the structure of the eyes. I've even heard that just because their eyes are black, again, folks, this is just Supernatural Saturdays. We just theorize. We have a little bit of fun. It's an opportunity for us to step aside from the politics, the craziness of the world, and just go on an adventure. Ghosts, UFOs, aliens, all that fun stuff. Bigfoot. As I heard the black part of the alien's eyes is just a lens that can actually be taken out. Very similar to how we wear sunglasses. They've just developed a lens that goes over their actual eyes. So something curious and thoughtful to think about.
Human beings and the terrible behaviors that we have. If we one day do give birth to some sort of an artificial being, like Marshall McLuhan's quote, "We are the sex organs of the machine world." That one day we...
Okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah, McLuhan was brilliant. And that quote has always been one of my favorites because, okay, what are we doing when we're constantly technologically innovating? We're constantly looking for faster cars, better computers, bigger screens, faster, more resolution, more pixels, more this, more that, higher bandwidth, 5G, 10G.
Right.
What are we doing? We're moving into this, if you just follow it, objectively stand back, don't attach yourself or your civilization, your culture to it, and look at what it is. We're moving 100% towards technological innovation. If you looked at this species from afar, and if you weren't a part of it, you would say, well, what does this species do? Oh, they make things. They make things better every year. Beehives are the same fucking thing that you see 10 years ago. You go by, you see a beehive, it's amazing, it's cool, but they're the same fucking thing. They figured out how to do it, they make a beehive.
Right.
We don't do that. We make better things.
What would you
constantly.
And at some point, I think that technology is going to fuse with us.
Yes.
And we're going to become...
It's already happening.
Yeah.
Elon Musk talked about it on my podcast, that we are cyborgs. You just carry it in your pocket. It's a phone. It answers any question you want. You can talk to it. It'll give you the answers instantaneously. It navigates you. It has all your phone numbers in it. It has all your contacts. You can get a hold of people. People are listening to you through it. It's connecting us in ways even involuntary.
I think that's also been kind of a detriment to kind of education system. Many of you know I'm a high school teacher. As I've noticed, the short-term memory that students have has decreased. Now, could that be just kind of in my milieu, in my environment here in the state of California? It could be, where the students outside of California don't necessarily have that shortening of short-term memory. But also, there is this idea of Neuralink, right, where you're going to be able to implant a chip in the brain. It could, almost like the Matrix. You can learn things. You can cure a lot of diseases or horrible things that have happened in people's lives, like somebody being paralyzed or quadriplegic can all of a sudden now walk and move and all these other things. So, or you can attach an arm, right, to somebody, or legs, or something like that. Something that's made by yes, humans, but also just kind of a mechanical piece that's connected to you, like we've seen in Terminator, or I guess like Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker's hand, right? So I definitely think we're going to get there, and I think we'll be able to even see that, I'd say, in the next 50 years, especially with dealing with AI now that's out, because this was recorded about 3 or 4 years ago, folks. This is what we're watching right now, and they had no idea about ChatGPT and the AI. So when you have AI that can fill in certain formulas and mathematical problems that we haven't been able to solve yet as human beings, you're going to see an exponential movement in terms of what we can make and what we can do. I'll give you kind of an idea how crazy this is. If you've seen chess has been around for a very long time. They've let AI play chess millions of times, and it's actually developed plays and strategies of which the human being has never seen before. So it's actually creating certain strategies for us to be able to play chess. It's remarkable stuff that's happening right now.
Apparently.
Haptics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's also getting on your wrist. How many people have iWatches, Apple Watches? They put them on their wrist.
Right, and that's only because we can't integrate them yet. But you know that point is coming.
100%. Yeah, I didn't joke about it last night, but I have a bit about it that I do, about the integration between humans and technology. That's
What would you do if you were a hyper intelligence, right? Would you do the work yourself, or would you create some cool things called like humans to do it for you? Would you create things that are cybernetic organisms to come in with machines and do it for you? If you were a hyper intelligence that has kind of changed like you've described, you'd probably create workers, right?
Well, that's a vast conspiracy theory.
I'm not talking about conspiracy.
But it is a kind of a conspiracy,
I'm
right?
asking you.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, you could look at it that way, but that is the way a conspiracy theorist would look at it. The way I would look at it is like there's obviously a progression going on, a biological progression. There's some sort of an integration with technology. There's some sort of imperative, this need for technological innovation. It's inescapable. Everyone has it. And I think it's attached to materialism in some sort of a strange way, because so many people work so hard to get new things. And like, God, that seems so illogical and preposterous, and it makes people unhappy, and depression's on the rise, but nobody seems to be able to stop it. Like, why is that? Well, maybe it's because we are the electronic caterpillars that give birth to the butterfly. Maybe that's what we're doing.
No,
Maybe
it could very well be.
What our job is to do is to make some sort of a cocoon, and we don't even know we're doing it while we're doing it. Do you think a caterpillar is aware? Like, hey, caterpillar, what are you doing? Man, I'm doing my thing. It's my job. I have to make a cocoon. Then I'm going to become like a butterfly.
This could be a natural part of evolution.
It could be.
That we're just supposed to do this.
Exactly.
And make the jump to some sort of mechanized,
Yeah,
non-biological.
Have you ever seen an orangutan that is fishing with a spear?
No.
They've figured out how to fish with spears. There's primatologists.
Wait, without somebody showing them how to fish?
No, they've imitated human beings doing it, and now they do it, but they do it independently. They're not trained orangutans. They're wild orangutans. Look at that. There's a wild orangutan.
Okay, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Well, there's these primatologists. I guess you would call them primatologists. That's the term.
That's a great
biologists. Biologists that believe that monkeys and chimps and some of the great apes are moving into the Stone Age, that they've currently entered the Stone Age. Like, they're not staying what they were 100,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, but they're actively using tools, and they're experimenting with different ways to use those tools. And then they're making tools out of stone. They're making tools out of sticks, and they're using them. Well, this might just be what happens. This might just be what happens. I mean, why else? Why the fuck do we work so hard? I mean, I was driving to L.A. this morning. I had a doctor's appointment, so I was on the 405 at 8 in the morning. Like, Jesus Christ! Like, this is so crazy. When you're on the 405 in L.A. at 8 o'clock in the morning, you see literally a million cars.
Yeah, red light.
And it's just everywhere you go, it's people. And also, I'm in a Tesla, so I have it on autopilot. So I'm there sitting, I'm listening to a podcast. I barely have my hand on the wheel. I'm not touching shit. This car's driving me along. I'm not even doing anything. I'm just hanging out. It's so much less stress, by the way, to do it that way.
Right.
So it encourages you to innovate. It encourages you to embrace this new technology.
This has nothing to do with the podcast, but for those that don't live in the state of California, we have the worst traffic in the entire United States, especially in Southern California. The 405 is like a major artery in Southern California, and almost any time of the day you pop on that bad boy, you are in stop and go traffic. If you're 30 miles south of LA like I am, it could take you anywhere from hour and a half to 3 hours just to get 30 miles in LA traffic. It's insane. It's insane. I know exactly what he's talking about. I used to work up in LA, and some days it would take me literally 3 hours to get home from work. That's not a joke. It was minimum an hour and a half every day, but some days traffic was just so bad it was 3 hours.
I got this giant screen. It's showing me the navigation in front of me. Oh, I'll be there 5 minutes early. Excellent. And I'm listening to a podcast wirelessly. It's Bluetooth streaming from my phone, and I pulled that podcast, which came out today out of the fucking sky, and I'm listening to it, and I'm all comfortable in my nice little car, just driving on my way to the doctor's office.
This is irresistible stuff.
Yeah. It's different than your Walkman.
Yeah,
back in the day.
It is irresistible. It is irresistible.
It's frighteningly irresistible.
But is
what
it frightening? I mean, if you were a monkey, right? If you were an Australopithecus, would you go, man, I don't want to fucking be a person and live in a house? That's bullshit. I like just swinging around on trees. I like running from jaguars. This is life. Guys, life is running from crocodiles. It's not living in a fucking suburban community.
There's probably some that are like that.
Yeah, you know, I remember growing up, and maybe some of you are with me, especially because our normal show, right, the Bald Brad Show, is a conservative Republican podcast. I remember growing up, my parents were always saying, oh, I just want to get away from everybody. I want to just live in the middle of nowhere, a nice ranch, peace and quiet. And I was sitting there like, why? Everything's great. Look at all the people, all the stuff that's going on around. The older I get, and I think the more you see, not to get political, but the destruction of the Democrat Party and what they're doing in this country, and just people in general, makes me go, you know what? I don't want to be around people. I want to live in the middle of nowhere, away from everybody. Yeah, I'll be able to do my show. I love having the internet and stuff like that. 100% agree. But I also remove myself from a lot of this stuff a lot of the time. And I've talked about that, where I will just read books, put away the phone, put away everything, just kind of just sit back and just invest in a book or something like that. It doesn't mean I don't do stuff like this. Of course I do, but I'm not sure that everybody's like, oh, I want to get back into technology. I want this to drive my life. I know there's people like that. I'm just not one of them. So I'm kind of on Bob Lazar's side here, more than Joe Rogan's side, but I understand what Joe Rogan's saying at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think when it comes, we're going to embrace it. We're going to embrace it the same way you embrace cell phones, the same way you embrace television. There's going to be a few holdouts. I don't even have an email address, man. Those there's a few and far between. Good luck with that, fuckface. Go move to the woods, Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah,
Go live in a
I was
cabin.
just going to throw Ted Kaczynski
Oh,
in
man.
there.
Ted Kaczynski was right. This is something that I think about sometimes when I get really high. That Ted Kaczynski was a part of the Harvard LSD studies. This has been proven. Ted Kaczynski, they cooked his fucking brain when he was at Harvard. And then when he went over to Berkeley and became a professor, his goal was to make enough money so that he could implement this program and live in the woods and then write his manifesto and start killing people that were involved in propagating technology.
He was expunged from the Harvard logs, by the way. This is something my friend just called me about. So there's like this private library, and they used to print people's names whenever they were part of a university, and he was one of a handful of people that were expunged from it. I want to jump back to the one thing, Joe. I want to be very careful with that word, conspiracy theorist. What I was saying to you was, we terraform our Earth, right? We terraform, we change the environment, we do all this innovation. What is stopping us from thinking that that's not being done? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying what's stopping us from thinking that that's being done on a much bigger level, on a cosmic level.
You mean like aliens coming down doing that to humans?
No, I'm telling you that there is something here. There's a fact. There's something. They're a craft. They're here. They're not ours. They're here. So the question is, what is that about? And I'm just looking at what we do with what you're describing with technology.
Well,
and
I think it's much more likely that the same way we observe chimps and we observe that they are now in the Stone Age, that they're observing us, and that they're recognizing that there is a pattern, that there's steps that happen. I mean, Carl Sagan talked about the different levels of civilization, and that that if we don't get past certain levels, we're never going to reach this.
Right.
I mean, we're in
type
this,
1 civilization.
Yeah.
We're going to stay type 0.
Well,
yeah.
we're in this warring, polluting.
Again, Michio Kaku talks about a very similar thing, type 1, type 2, type 3, 4, and he'll actually walk you through kind of what's involved in each type of civilization. Like, for example, sending your consciousness across the universe through a laser and coming through on the other side and implanting that consciousness that you are, even though you're on Earth, into a robotic system that's now on a different solar system in a different part of the universe, something like that. But this is fascinating stuff, folks.
Yeah.
Pillaging.
We're awesome.
Civilization.
Humans are awesome.
Well, I mean, we're awesome in a lot of ways,
But in that way, we're not.
Well, yeah, we're children that have immense power that we didn't really. The other thing is you're using the immense power that other people have created, right? I mean, even when you're driving a car and you're stomping on the gas, like, woo, you didn't invent the fucking engine. You didn't invent tires. There's all these things that were involved in the creation of this thing that is really outside of your grasp of understanding, but yet you have the ability to use it. Like a person with a gun, I'm just gonna bang, bang, bang people. You didn't invent a gun, so like you've without the intellect to craft and engineer and manifest these creations, you just have access to them because you have paper or you have Bitcoin or you have whatever the fuck you're using a credit card. Now you have almost no responsibility. You could just flippantly use these things, which is why we were very childlike in our actions because we haven't had to earn the responsibility. We haven't had to earn these things that we've been able to have, and you've only been able to have them because other people have innovated and spent ungodly amounts of time and effort and focus in the lab to create these things, and then they've all put them together. And then what's the reason to put them together? To profit. Well, what's the reason to profit? Well, why are you doing this? So you can buy more things. Well, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're making better things. That's what we do. That's all we do.
That's all we do is make better things.
Yeah. Why the fuck do we need oil? Why do we need oil? Why can't we just burn wood and stay home? Why can't we grow chickens and food in the backyard? Why can't we do it? Well, we fucking can. We certainly can. People do it. But we decide to make that almost impossible. Our preferred way of living is to stuff everyone into a very small area where no one grows anything other than weed. And this is what LA is. LA is 20 million people with hard surfaces, as many hard surfaces as you can. Boy, if you got an acre backyard in LA, holy shit, look at all that green. This is amazing. Well, no, that's the fucking earth coming through this weird sort of creation that we've put on top of the earth. But the goal is that, like New York City, there's none of it. Right? You've got Central Park, and they just got human shit. Stacked up. No one's growing anything. And then constant work. Everyone's up early. Go, go, go. Innovate, progress, make that money so you can buy more things. And every year, hey, Apple, where's this fucking new phone? As if your phone isn't good enough. Like your phone's taking pictures and videos. And
that is so true. So I went from the iPhone, I think it was like 6 or 7, to the iPhone 14. So I just got tired of buying a new iPhone every year. I'm like, there's not that much of a difference. Like, if I'm going to spend, what is it, like $1,000 now on a phone or something like that? If I'm going to spend that kind of money, there better be a pretty big leap in terms of technology for me to spend that kind of cash. I'm a cheapskate. So he makes a great point here is like, we just innovate, we buy, we try to work for what? You want to buy more stuff? Where are you going to put that stuff? That's why a lot of people have storage units. They pack their garage. When their garage is full, then they'll get another storage unit or whatever it may be. That's all we do. Again, I'm loving this conversation. I mean, it's kind of deviating away, I think, from kind of the UFO, UAP, and extraterrestrial, but that idea of where we're going and what we're doing is fascinating in terms of how do we view our own life and what we're doing, and maybe what we're doing needs to change because we might be recognizing right now maybe we're one of these people.
People are calling you and you got applications that tell you which way the wind's blowing. It's not good enough.
A blink of an eye, it's all gone, though, that, like 10,000 years and the Hoover Dam goes or whatever, Mount Rushmore disintegrates. So it's amazing because we have created that and everything's trying to spring up through that. We keep it maintenance down, but we're a blink, man. Something hits.
But we don't think that way. Well, you think in terms of your own life, right? You think in terms of what you want and what you need right now. We are, in many ways, this combination of this weird, primitive, ape-like thing with the ability to calculate and manipulate our world and our environment that makes us wholly unique. On top of that, with existential angst and fear. So what do you do with that? We fucking water it down with antidepressants. Give these fucking people some shit that keeps them moving. Well, they're worried about the future. They're trying to figure out what reality is. You're on a goddamn convertible spaceship spinning 1,000 miles an hour, hurling through infinity. There's no meaning to this thing. Just keep making shit. Keep making stuff. And then one day they're going to be able to hit that switch and this life will be born out of innovation and thinking and progress and technology. And more than likely, it's probably going to be what we're seeing that these things are that you're observing.
I'm not observing them, but yeah.
Well, someone's observing.
Are you implying that they're us?
I don't think they are us, but I think they are what happens when things keep going. It's not us, just like we're not monkeys, right? I'm not a chimp.
Oh, that'd be
chimp
cool.
like.
They're from here. Is your idea?
No.
No.
That this is what happens
Yes.
all over the universe.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Totally.
That this is what happened. Look, here's the thing. I went to see Brian Cox's. He has this amazing live show with Robin Ince where they have these LED screens, these huge screens with this high resolution depictions of the cosmos. And one of the most mind-blowing things was he has this large-scale image of the universe, and it shows all the individual galaxies of the universe, and it just keeps moving through all these galaxies in 3 dimensions. And it's fucking incredible. But what's stunning is the relative uniformity of it, even at, you're obviously looking at an incredibly small depiction of something that's immensely large, like a galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars. You're seeing it as this little dot, but this little dot that's flying through space, surrounded by other little darts with very similarly spaced distances
homogeneous all through,
So I'm like, if we see uniformity in that form, in terms of like the distance between galaxies, like so many galaxies, it's so similar. They might vary slightly, and that slightly might be hundreds of millions of light years, right? But there's so much uniformity. Why would we not assume that uniformity exists pretty much everywhere, and that all these things that you're seeing that are so similar, you do see binary star systems, you do see single star systems like star, but there's also some speculation that Earth and that our solar system one time was a binary star system, right? I mean, that's one of the speculations about that object that they find outside the Kuiper Belt that they think is 10 times larger than Earth. They think it might have been at one point in time a star. But this uniformity that you see, why wouldn't we think that has its same implications biologically? That there's some sort of a biological uniformity, and that this happens given the right sets of circumstances.
Yeah, it could be.
You should tell them some of the stuff that you read that you don't know is true. I mean, if the stuff was true about the propulsion stuff, I mean, anyway,
Well, what have you read? What
you saw too. I mean,
What are you talking about? Spill the beans, Bob.
I got to poke the bear here a little bit.
Get some more liquor in you.
The only thing I could verify was what I had my hands on. There was talk of weapon systems, that there were different projects. Project Galileo, Project Sidekick was supposed to be weapon applications of the craft. Project Looking Glass had to do with time, any effects of time in the craft. Now, we're not talking about.
I wonder if any of these projects that he's talking about, and maybe I'll have to do kind of side research when I'm done recording this and stuff, because I'm finding it fascinating that he's just kind of listing these projects. I'm curious if they're publicly known now. Because Project Looking Glass, I mean, that sounds fascinating, and I don't even remember the other names. I'll have to go back, but if you guys know of these projects, if you could find them online, put a link down for everybody else that's interested in this stuff, so we could just click on it and read it ourselves, and kind of have an aggregation of information just in the comment section below. That'd be phenomenal. So if you already know of these projects and you have a place where we can read about them, put them in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you.
Making a time machine like in science fiction, but we're talking about small distortions, intentional distortions of time, and how that can be used, as a not as it was part of a weapon program.
How are you informed in this?
These again were just the small briefings that I read, but again, I don't really like to talk about those because I don't have any information on them, and it was just small briefings.
But you told Commander Fravor that what he saw might have been a time dilation and not
it could be
propulsion.
Because gravity affects time. Space time. I'm sure you've heard of that, and what Commander Fravor saw as he was in the F-18 approaching it, he said he described it as a ping pong ball in a cup and shaking it back and forth. It was moving that fast. Now, obviously, if there's anything inside there, it's going to be battered to hell. But my point was that, one of two things. Either there's a gravitational envelope in there which negates any inertia effects, or you are seeing through a gravity distortion field. So, just like you're looking at a hot highway and you see, like an optical distortion going through there. Well, the same thing happens in gravity, and the craft may not actually be moving like that. It may just look like it because you can only see it through the field. So it may be making much more gentle moves. I'm not saying that's it, but it has to be one of the two.
And the thing shows up 60 miles away. They noticed it on radar 60 seconds after it left Commander Fravor, but it was at his cap point, which is the next point he was destined to go to, 60 miles away. And in 60 seconds on radar, the same object ends up there.
So
that's why I don't necessarily agree with what Bob Lazar is saying in terms of it's just the field of which you're observing the craft moving, and that it might not actually be moving that rapidly because you're looking, again, through kind of a lens through a field. And I don't believe that because, again, you'd have to move pretty rapidly to go, again, 60 miles in basically 1 second or a minute or however far. I mean, you guys heard what Jeremy Corbell stated, but you'd have to move pretty rapidly in order to get to that destination, the same way as that you'd have to move pretty rapidly and kind of ping pong around in a small area that we see from the fighter jets in terms of what they observed and saw. So I think it's more or less maybe the own gravitational field around it. Yeah, it could displace maybe inertia or kind of counteract inertia so you're not kind of splattering up against the walls. But I think at the same time is that you're almost in your own time and space within whatever that anti-gravity or the area field of which it's producing. You're outside of time and space, which goes into a whole different thing in terms of relativity and if are you aging at a slower rate than those outside of the field? That goes into a whole different conversation. That's not what this video is about, but it's fascinating, folks. This stuff is awesome. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's continue.
it's going a mile a second.
No, I think the radar just picked it up in 60 seconds.
Yeah, it could have been there instantly, but
we don't know.
the cycle.
The cycle of the radar, and I'm assuming this is what he's about to say. The cycle of the radar, it takes about 60 seconds, I think, for it to come around, where it could have just been there in a blip of a second. So by the time it gets around and it basically refreshes, then it appears.
So nobody knows. That's the whole thing.
So it cycles, like radar cycles? Like
yeah, it doesn't sweep, but
right,
I mean,
like
it scans.
Like,
it's a planar
antenna.
array, so it just it scans around at random places.
That's the spy one does the really cool. Yeah, it doesn't do the whole loop anymore.
Right. The point is though that the craft moved to his next location before he knew where his next location was going to be.
Jesus.
And that's well documented. So that's a pretty shocking piece of information.
What's fascinating to me too is that you were discussing this, the way this reactor worked, and that these things were not really connected.
No, nothing is connected. There's no wiring at all.
That freaks me the fuck out.
Charge your iPhone,
Yeah. Well, wireless.
On the little, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a simple electromagnetic.
Tesla.
Yeah, I know again, but that's just simple electromagnetic induction.
Right, but I mean Tesla, the scientist, had this concept of
right. That's
what he's,
yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, for other people that don't know what we're saying, he wanted to send wireless electricity through the sky, and Westinghouse was like, "Get the fuck out of here with that!" Like when anybody could just pull electricity out of the sky.
Can't meter it.
Yeah, they couldn't.
Yeah.
They couldn't.
We had this talk in the car right over. I'm trying to chill him out. We're talking about Tesla and how he couldn't be metered and how it all went down. So it's funny you bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what would have happened in terms of innovation had he been allowed to go forward with that?
Well, we probably wouldn't have computers.
You think?
Yeah, I'm pretty positive.
Why is that?
Forget about microelectronics. Well, this is dumping huge amounts of electromagnetic energy in the air. And yeah, we'd be able to wirelessly turn on our lights, but there'd be no radio communication. The interference would be something would be overwhelming. It would induce electric currents in anything with a small wire on it. So integrated circuits, transistors would be disintegrated before they were even, tested for operation. So it would
Maybe
destroy.
It would have fucked us up.
Yeah, it would have stopped us dead. It'd be great. You can turn lighters on and heaters from all over the place with no wires, but it would stop modern electronics.
And if we became dependent on it, it would almost be like our dependence on fossil fuels. Although it's destructive, it's very difficult for us to get off the nipple.
It would have changed the course of how we developed, which is so interesting when you talk about if a civilization, other star system didn't even start with fossil fuels. They had 115 naturally on their planet, and they're like, cool, anti-gravity is pretty awesome.
Well, the fact that they didn't
I think it's important that actually happened.
Yeah.
It might have been stopped in its tracks for a reason.
Whoa.
Wow.
And I think it's incredibly difficult for us to imagine technological progression under another timeline other than the one that we've experienced.
Yeah, that's difficult.
If we imagine what this alien race must have been like, and how, I mean, God, just to be able to see something, obviously we've seen it in different life forms, right? Like we see the life of certain beetles in comparison to the life of certain fish. Very, very different existence, very different life cycles.
Octopus.
Yeah, octopus. Yeah, I mean, we see all these different variables in terms of biological entities on Earth, but we don't see it in terms of technological innovation, as we're the only one that's intelligent that can innovate. I mean, we have intelligent creatures, but they're in the ocean. The only other thing that are like us are dolphins and orcas and whales, and they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment. And subsequently, because they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment, we put them in fish tanks. And we're like, get in the tank, do some tricks.
Right.
The only thing he saw in the craft, if we were considering Bob's story, the only thing that he saw in the craft that he related to that looked like a human could make was this honeycomb hatch. And I always loved that because you're like obsessed with this thing that you could recognize.
I only focus on that because it was the one thing that I understood how it worked.
What was it?
And it was the access to the level below, and it was if you take you have a 6-pack of beer and you take out the cardboard dividers, set it on the table, you can put a lot of pressure on the top. But if you push it from the sides, it collapses flat. So it was something like that in a honeycomb shape that was essentially some sort of sheet metal, and you could walk on that in the upper layer, but if you took the corner, stuck your finger in, and pushed, it collapsed and made an entryway. So I thought that was a really unique, I'd never seen that before, and it was the only thing in the craft that made absolute sense to me. I said, we can make that, and all that is a hatchway.
Was there any discussion about the materials that were used to make the craft?
I'm sure there was, but that was the metallurgy division. It had nothing to do with us.
So you never got
not even the slightest briefing. I don't even know if it was metal or it was ceramic. I think there's a fine line between the two.
Now, one of the things that's happened to you that has allowed people to discredit you was there's obviously been some sort of an effort to erase your past.
Yeah.
Some sort of an effort to erase your education history, your employment history at Los Alamos. In fact, the only way your employment history was proven at Los Alamos is someone got a directory of the employees from the past and read into it, and you were on that list. So it proved that you worked there even though people were trying to deny it, and they were trying to use that as a way to discredit you, that you never did work at Los Alamos. You weren't really a scientist. What was that like to experience? I mean, of course, we're talking about the 1980s, the 1990s, when you could get away with something like that.
Yeah, obviously there were a lot less records on computers at that time. It was still file cabinets and folders.
I do want to be transparent in terms of Bob Lazar and his story. I've been doing a lot of kind of in between parts 3 and 4, kind of watching a lot of videos of people picking apart Bob Lazar's story. And one of the things they really focus on is his education, that he didn't actually go to the institutions that he says he went to. And one of the ways that Bob Lazar supposedly gets past it, again, take this all as a grain of salt, folks, it's just a lot of fun to kind of watch and listen to, is that what they're bringing up here is that the government, whoever that may be, erased his past and kind of got a hold of people in those institutions to help that process along of erasing his past and things like that. So I personally don't know what to believe. It's tough because if he's lying, you guys, the guy's a very good liar. There could be parts of his story that are legitimate and then parts of his story that's absolute bogus. I mean, who really knows? Like I said, it's fun nonetheless, but the education side of it and his work history is kind of the two things they really pick holes on.
But that was frightening. That was one of the first things
what happened?
I think George Knapp was the first one that uncovered that. I mean, he saw my birth certificate disappear.
It disappeared.
Yeah,
there was no record of you being.
Yeah, there was no record of that. There was no record.
His mom tells me about that. Like, it was frightening for her. He's got a real family. He's a real person. It's frightening for her.
But the Los Alamos thing really surprised me. and that they were so adamant that, no, this guy never worked here. Don't be ridiculous. And George went back and forth, for
I got the letters on the wall, yeah.
months. I mean, it was ridiculous. But fortunately, somebody came up with a 1982 phone book directory. I mean, and also, originally I told you, when I worked there, I was on the front page of the paper. So they were still able to archive, bring that back from the archives. And, Bob Lazar, a physicist working here at Los Alamos. So there was at least something there. But somehow George came up with the phone directory.
And then Bob took George with cameras into Los Alamos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we flew out there and I said, look, come on in. I'll show you where I worked. We'll go in. We'll meet people. And George went with me and filmed
you knew
inside
how to
there.
navigate the place, so you'd
Oh
obviously
yeah,
been
and
there before.
met people, and and
Los
so
Alamos
no
was
problem.
also the place where they had the machine that was able to read the size of your digits.
No, that was in Los
wasn't?
Alamos. That was S4.
That was S4. And explain that.
So now this was back in the 80s.
And this is back in the 80s where when you discuss this, people are like, this doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it?
It was a way, this is before fingerprint scanners and, and any high resolution scanner at that time. So what it was a device that had a little picture of a hand on a glass plate with pins in it. So you could jam your hand in there. And there was a bright light above it and a sensor underneath. And when you put your hand in there, the light would turn on and it would measure the bones in your finger because the light shone through your bones. And apparently, the length of the bones in your fingers are extremely unique and easy to measure. And they use that. When you put your hands on there, the light would turn on and your badge would pop out.
There's it right there.
Oh, there it is. That's it. And I tried to describe this to people, and they said, that is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. And I said, hey, my badge came out of that thing. I put my hand on it, badge popped out, and that's how I could open the doors and get into S4. And
and everybody discredited that. They said it was bullshit. It was science fiction. And Jeremy, you found, and everybody.
And that's how I could open the doors and get.
I just want to make sure you guys can actually see that. That's what they were looking at there. I didn't realize that my mug, meaning my face, was covering it. It's so fascinating. I heard actually reports later on that somebody just stumbled upon these photos. Like he had been talking about this for 80, 90, you're talking 30 something years and nobody's ever heard of this. Nobody's ever seen it. So somebody actually produced photos many, many years later. And that reaction of him seemed very genuine, by the way. Again, that reaction was kind of like, when you see something that you've been talking about for a while and then finally somebody shows it to you and then they're like, you have that reaction, like you're surprised, like, oh, that's exactly what I've seen. That's it. That reaction seemed very genuine from Bob Lazar. Let's continue.
Into S4, and
and everybody discredited that. They said it was bullshit. It was science fiction. And Jeremy, you found this.
I found it through a good friend of mine named Tyler Rogaway, and he had some good sources inside of Area 52 where they also used these for the stealth program right around that time. So now I've got all these people that worked within who, said only if you're in certain programs would we use this technology. It was kind of shit, actually. They didn't keep it for very long, beginning of biometrics. So I was able to reveal it in my film. I kept my mouth shut until I showed it to Bob. In the movie, the first time he saw it was how you see it in the documentary. That's his genuine reaction. I'm getting goosebumps.
That was a great idea, the way you did it.
Thank you, man, because you know what? Guess what? I'm actually trying to see if he's telling the truth. That's how I started. That's how I started. So it was really cool to see that, and that you get to see it, his actual reaction.
Has that been verified by other people?
Yeah, so to me it has. Personally, I get emails every day and people are telling me where these are used and how they're used and send me photos. I got a lot of photos of identity mats now.
Well, how they were used, right? They're not
how they were used,
but
I don't. The most recent one was way more recent than I thought in another country. But yeah, that technology was used. So what's so funny is that this technology, even in the Area 52 where they'd use them for Tonopah, one of the guys who will go on camera with me, he will do an interview with me. He was a technician for one of these, and he hated them because they were really bad. They always broke down and he was a technician for him. Now, he won't tell me where. If he worked at Area 52, so it was probably Tonopah. It's very separated, even on the base. But yeah.
So there was that.
Yeah.
There is your education record. That was also like, what happened with that?
Well, that disappeared also. You know, that I've never gone anywhere for education. I never attended any classes at Caltech. I never attended anything at MIT.
You did attend classes in those places, though.
I did attend classes in those places.
Do you know anybody that you went to school with?
Yes, I do.
And have they verified that they went to school with you?
Well, I gave Jeremy some names, but
Interesting. Okay, so it does build credibility, honestly, kind of for both sides, because he's saying he just took classes there. I mean, yeah, you would imagine there would still be some sort of record of you attending that university to take those classes, unless you were just auditing the course and you kind of just sat in. And kind of the point I'm making here is, because I was thinking when he's talking about education, I'm like, you would think you would have your diploma around, right? I mean, you could fake a diploma, don't get me wrong, but he's not saying he graduated from there, from my understanding. He's just saying he attended classes at Caltech and then MIT. He's not saying he graduated from those institutions, because there are records of institutions that he graduated with, from my understanding, with his bachelor's degree. So it's, again, it's tough to kind of believe who's telling the truth here, because it's 100% plausible what he's saying. But on the other end, everyone's like, well, you didn't graduate from those institutions. Doesn't seem like that's what he's saying here. He's saying he just attended classes.
The reason I don't say these names publicly is because every single time I mention a name, somebody gets in trouble.
They don't want to be.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But what is that experience like, seeing your birth certificate erased, seeing your employment history?
Well, it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening.
But it's also the fuel that the debunkers use, the so-called air quote skeptics. I don't like the term skeptics. I'm going to say this publicly because I really have only said this privately. I think it's a sloppy, lazy way to look at things, to just be a skeptic.
Look,
I want people to be objective. And I think there's a lot of things you should be skeptical of. I think you should look at things from a hardline science perspective. You should be objective. But the idea of skeptics, the problem with that is you're always looking for things to be bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous, because I think some things aren't bullshit.
It's confirmation bias on the other end. You're just deciding to take a square thing and put it in a round hole no matter what.
And I find a lot of them to be.
That's a really great point. And again, I'm not trying to interject politics, but it's one example of many of the Bold Brad Show reviewers that watch the show, that listen to what we talk about in terms of the left will sit there and they're skeptical about everything, where you show them that something that's actual objectively true, not subjective, but objectively true, that you could pin and point towards, meaning a male is a male and a female is a female, and they're skeptical about it, right? They're going to sit there and reason with themselves through whatever biases that they may have, that's going to tell them that that's not the truth, that the truth is that you could be gender fluid or something like that. So, or in the same way that that's not a human being inside the womb, that's just a cluster of cells, that is not a human being. So it's the same point that they're making here, is if you just live your life being skeptical about everything, you're going to sit there and rationalize with yourself to sit there and confirm that bias on the other end that Jeremy Corbell is speaking of here, that you're technically true, when objectively what we see is true objectively, but your subjective truth, that's that confirmation bias that we're talking about here, that's the falsehood, but you reason with yourself to make it as if it was objectively true.
Lazy.
Yeah.
A lot of them to be lazy thinkers.
Sure.
Because they're always putting it into that box instead of going, instead of just separating their ego. They're playing a game, and the game is calling bullshit. I want to call bullshit, and I'm going to line up all these reasons why it's bullshit, and I'm going to ignore anything that might be contrary to that definition.
Yeah, that does happen.
Every time I'm thinking I'm going to catch him in something, all along this process, I found Dr. Krangle. He came forward and said, I was in security briefings with Bob Lazar, the physicist at Los Alamos. He went on the record with me. Now, the other people I talked with, why won't they go on the record with me? Because they're still working there. So that's the difference, right? What can the public have, right?
Or even if they're not working there, they want to live their lives. Why? I mean, obviously, people have seen what's happened to you.
Mike Thigpen, after 30 years.
Yeah, really.
I found him.
If you look at all the information on, concerning my accounts, that's verifiable. It can't possibly be a bullshit story anymore. It's really way past that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was
Mike Thigpen is. I mean, how could I possibly know?
So Mike Thigpen was the guy that did the security clearances to go to the base. One of the guys that was
And this
used.
is a guy that you worked with.
He said he did.
Right.
And George Knapp, George didn't believe him. George put him through 4 polygraph tests, right? He tried to see, man, this is a big risk. It sounds interesting, but let's see if he's telling the truth. One of the things was, Bob said there's a guy named Mike Thigpen. He did security clearances for the base, and that's a weird name. It's a very specific. For 30 years, George found this guy in this weird department that he didn't even know it was Mike Thigpen. The guy wouldn't talk to me, ghosted him, totally ghosted him for 30 years. Used Facebook and Google Image Match through his children. I was able to find him after 30 years, and I talked to him 3 times on the phone. He lives on the East Coast. He almost went on camera with me, confirmed that he did security clearances for the base in 1989, confirmed he remembers Bob Lazar, and what you don't know is there's a handwritten note that a friend of yours has from Mike.
What?
I know, I'm going to give it to you later. But that is real. That is actual. So
A handwritten note that says what?
like
This is new to me.
So when
When they do security clearances, they go through all your friends and family.
and they go to your friend's family, yeah.
Yeah,
So this is
and,
to Bob,
wow.
and I had people come to me for a friend of mine that's serving, and they're doing a security clearance for him. And even though I'm like the UFO guy, they did, the FBI will come and visit my house and make sure that they talk about my friend, and they lift a little card. And when my wife told him to get away because she didn't know who they were, they left a little card. It's super cute now. Back then it was a handwritten note, and his friend has it for him that you haven't seen in
Oh my God.
2
Holy
decades.
shit.
So if you're listening,
How
friend,
come you're telling me this
I
now?
don't know why I'm telling
What
this
is
to
this
you.
card?
It's just a little handwritten note with Mike Thigpen's signature.
I mean, a card like a postcard.
Like a piece of paper that he
Okay.
left on the door saying when Bob gets back or whatever it says on it. So it's just another little funny thing. I found the guy. He does the security clearances. He admitted to me he did it, and he admitted to me he was dodging.
If you're confused, and maybe I'm confused, but basically, you go to see your friend, right? You're showing up to your friend's house, and the wife opens up the door, the husband opens up the door, and they're like, hey, get away. They don't know who you are. They've never seen you before. You're just a work buddy or whatever it is. And they say, hey, get away. They're not here. So instead of, calling them on a cell phone or something like that, because it didn't really exist back then, you left them just a note, right? You leave a note on the door, or you email them a note like, hey, said hi, like, just wanted to make sure everything was well. Just stopped by really quick, yada, yada, yada. Here's the signature, and left. That's my idea of kind of what takes place. In the same way that back in the day, right, we would leave a note. Your parents might have left you a note. Hey, we went out, if you need anything, food's in the oven or something like that. They just left you a quick note because there wasn't cell phones and stuff like that. So that's my guess of what he's kind of talking about.
George Knapp, because when George said his name on the news, he dropped his fork into his steak or into his potatoes or whatever, and he's looking at his wife. He was in trouble. His name's never supposed to be out there like this. Just a security clearance guy. But you don't want national attention associated with anything Bob has to say. But anyway, this unique name Bob said for 30 years, and the guy ghosted George Knapp. George could prove he existed. He actually talked to me, man. He talked to me 3 times. He almost went on camera with me. It's just crazy. What happens after 30 years? You just get more info.
Well, that's one of the reasons why when you and me and Jeremy and George Knapp had that conversation on the phone,
Yeah.
I said, I think what we can do with this podcast is important. I really do. I think it's important for people to hear this from you in a very clear, just very concise way. And if you examine all the information that you've said today, if you look at all the things that the detractors have said, if you look at all of the new recent evidence that's coming out and all these really high-level people in the military and the government that are discussing this, it gives you far more credibility than you would have had in the 1980s when this came out.
Fuck yes.
Sure.
You can't
It's a different
ignore his
world.
story just because you don't like it anymore.
That's why I thought it was important that you come out and refresh the world's memory and let people know. And like I said, I don't want to say I'm a fan of yours, but I guess I'm a fan of yours. As a human being, I'm a fan of yours. But I've been following you for decades. I've been following the story for decades. I mean,
No kidding. Oh.
I have VHS tapes
Bob,
at
like
home.
a lot of the world has.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, anybody
You don't
that
get it.
has any sort of a vested interest or just a fascination with UFOs has followed your story because there's no one else. There's no one else that comes forward. There's some guy who said, I worked underground with the aliens. They shot my hand off. Like, there's a bunch of like wacky dudes. They're underground. There's bases. They're shooting lasers through the Earth's crust and they move them at light speed. There's a lot of those guys. They seem schizophrenic. They seem crazy. They might even be disinformation agents. They might be people that are designed to muddy the waters, which for sure has happened.
People are coming forward, though, now. It's amazing. And by doing this, what you're doing, you're providing an opportunity just for Bob to tell his story. You know, believe it or not, he can tell his story. It's amazing because more people will come forward now that are involved with these projects. They'll come forward to you, to me. They're coming forward. And so what you've done here is provide that opportunity if they need it. And it's amazing. I just want to say, Bob.
Just don't come forward to me.
No, don't come forward to Bob. Why were you freaking nauseous at the beginning of this, like so upset? Why'd you have a migraine? Because that started off so hard. My God, I was sitting here like, did this?
Well, why are you asking him why? It's
because
obvious. Anxiety. The guy's gone through 30 fucking years of being persecuted. They've erased his birth certificate.
I just want to hear him.
What do you want to hear from him?
I want to hear him say. I want them to
Why
hear
do
him.
I have to say that?
You don't.
Joe just said
we
it.
get
Yeah.
it.
I step out.
Okay.
Settle down. Yeah, I get it. It was hard for you to get him here, you know, and I appreciate.
It was hard for us. You
Well,
So that's pretty much the end of Bob Lazar's story. I implore you to go check out what people have to say about his story, those that try to debunk his story, because when you just hear one side of it, it sounds very compelling, and it very much could be. But there are some holes in his story that people have come up with. Now, is he telling the truth? I would like to believe that he is telling the truth because it's fascinating, but that's just a bias of mine, right? I want this stuff to be real. I see a lot of the evidence coming out. It's so fascinating to me. But I want to know what you all think about this. This is, again, the last episode of Bob Lazar's story. We will 100% pursue other people's stories like Dr. Greer talking about UFOs. That will probably be coming up a lot in the summer because he's releasing some stuff here in the coming months, folks. What I'm actually trying to do is see if I get like a press pass to go to the event myself and see if we could live stream it or stuff like that. So that's kind of my workarounds here in the next month or two. But let me know what you think about this. Do you believe Bob Lazar's story? Do you believe in UFOs? We would love to hear from you folks. It really does support the channel, and it forces the YouTube algorithm to send our videos out there to new viewers who haven't seen our content or our channel. Hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy Supernatural Saturday. Again, our normal show, basically Monday through Friday, and then also we do a sprinkling of politics on Sunday. That is a political news commentary show where we give conservative thought, perspective, reactions to the major headlines and kind of breaking news. But Supernatural Saturdays is designed to kind of be able to bridge maybe that common gap or that ground between a conservative or Republican and a Democrat or independent, and kind of talk about something fun and explore something other than politics and just have one day out of the week to go into the supernatural, the paranormal, and the unexplained. So that's what Supernatural Saturdays is. It's an opportunity, again, just to have one day out of the week, just to have a little bit of fun here and connect as a community on a different level. And it seems like you guys really enjoy it. A lot of you have been asking, hey, when are we going to finish it? When are we going to start doing more of the ghost stuff? We're going to continue it, folks. So thank you so much again. Hit that like and subscribe button, folks, and I'll see you tomorrow here on the Brad Show.